Hey, greetings, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West here, the Executive Director of the American Constitutional Rights Union and the ACRU Action Fund. And welcome to another episode of Live Free TV brought to you by the American Constitutional Rights Union. You can visit our website at theacru.org. Again, that's theacru.org. You can also learn more about our veterans organization, the Committee to Support and Defend, because when you take that oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, it does not have a statute of limitations if you truly believe in that oath. So please join us at theacru.org. It's very interesting to me that every time someone does something that the Marxist left does not like, you're a threat to democracy. I mean, you want to stop crime, you're a threat to democracy. You want to deport criminal illegal immigrants, you're a threat to democracy. You want to do the exact same thing that members of the Democrat Party and blue states have done in their redistricting, where you have 8 blue states that have 0 Republican congressional representation, 3 states that only have 1. State like Illinois, where Donald Trump won 44%, but yet there are only 2 Republican members of the Illinois congressional delegation. You're a threat to democracy. And right now, we have the redistricting debate going on because the Texas State House Democrats and state Senate Democrats finally decided to come back and do their work. If I had been Governor West, I don't think that they would have a position to come back to. It would have been vacated. But if you say anything against them, that's a threat to democracy. But why is it that we never hear anyone saying, well, what's this thing about ranked choice voting? Which is the means by which we have an avowed Marxist Islamic jihadist running for mayor in New York City as the front runner by way of ranked choice voting in the Democrat primary there in New York City. We did an episode on ranked choice voting, and if you would like, go back and to the archives and look up that episode, because ranked choice voting is a threat to democracy, but yet that's something that Democrats and some very delusional Republicans want to support. In states where it has been implemented, like Alaska and Maine, now they're trying to, well, let's say unfix stupid. But right now, this is something that the left is pushing. And when you think about ranked choice voting being a threat to democracy, why is the left pushing for it? Because basically, after you rank choice your first series of votes and understand, if you go in and say, I'm only going to vote for this one person, you are disenfranchised. Your ballot is disenfranchised. You have to go down however many candidates there are, mark 1 through 5, and rank choice those individuals. That's a threat to democracy, especially when you tell someone that it cannot be one person, one vote, and then you cast away their vote. But then even after that, if you do decide to rank choice and it goes into this computer algorithm, all the other subsequent machinations and iterations of adjusting that voting sequence is left to a computer algorithm. What can be more of a threat to democracy than someone being forced to vote for someone, give them some support, give them their electoral ballot, even by ranked choice, when they don't want to do that? And then if they do that, then you have a computer algorithm that further decides on who is the one that actually gets that vote. But yet we don't hear anyone saying that's a threat to democracy. Or let's think about the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, NPVIC. And what is that? This is a bunch of blue states coming together to say, we do not care who actually wins the vote within our state for our electors. Whoever wins the national popular vote, that's who gets our electors. So, in other words, you're disenfranchising all of the voters within your state who would have said, we voted this way. This person won a popular vote in our state, so they get the electors of our state. No, 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 no. That's not what the Marxist left wants. They just want one big, happy national popular vote. And what really threw a monkey wrench into things in the November 2024 election, Donald Trump won the national popular vote and the electoral college vote, but they still want to get rid of the electoral college because what they want to have is this concentration of votes based upon the populated coastal elites, which is another reason why you see a lot of these blue states saying that we want to be sanctuary states and sanctuary cities, as you just saw the mayor of Boston come out and say, well, that's unconstitutional too. It's a threat to democracy to say that you want to have people that are here illegally, which is a crime, it's a felony offense. That's United States statute and code, that you want to count them in a census. That's a threat to democracy because I thought that the only people counted in the census were citizens so that we can correctly apportion representation, being at the national level, being at the state level, and being at the local level. But no, 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 no. That's not what the other side wants. And never forget in November 2024, that 12 of the states that Kamala Harris did win, not many more other than those 12, they did not have voter ID laws in those 12 states. Don't you think it's a threat to democracy to say that you don't have to present any form of identification to be able to participate in our electoral process and our representative democracy? America is a constitutional republic. First and foremost, you need to know that. But we do have a representative democracy, and we need to be protecting that representative democracy and the means by which we select those representatives through the democratic process. But you never hear the left saying the things that we're doing are a threat to democracy. They're very good at projecting on other people the things that they're doing and who they are. I mean, kind of like when they talk about Jim Crow 2.0. Well, Jim Crow 1.0 came from the Democrat Party. And I think they still like 1.5, 2.0, probably 3.0. That's what they're working on now when you look at our inner cities. But again, it comes back to this whole redistricting thing. When you talk about a threat to democracy, there are probably blue states that are overrepresented because guess what? Back during the last census, leftist groups brought lawsuits to make sure that illegals were counted. Illegals were counted in the census. So, really and truthfully, based upon that and the population shifts that we've seen coming here to Texas from California, Illinois, New York, and I'm sure that Florida has seen the same thing. Why do we believe that the numbers coming out of these blue states are correct? Their congressional representation is correct. That's why they don't want ICE to come in. That's why members of the Democrat Party, the Marxist left, a representative, congressional representative from the state of Illinois, referred to our immigrations and customs enforcement officers, men and women, minorities alike, as terrorists. They're trying to enforce the law, but yet you don't want them to enforce the law. I think that's a threat to our democracy. That's a threat to our constitutional republic. But something that Donald Trump just mentioned recently, and I think it's very important that we understand language. The left is very good at this manipulating language and making things sound as if they aren't. Like Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, right. Inflation Reduction Act, right. And we can think of many other things that they have brought forth. And it's kind of oxymoronic with an emphasis on that word moron. But when you hear Donald Trump saying that he's looking at an executive order to say we cannot have mail-in ballots in the United States of America, where did that come from? See, what we have to realize is that when you go to participate in our democratic process here in the United States of America, in other words, when you go to vote, there are some very simple means by which you do that. You do it by absentee ballot, which is a controlled item. You have to request that absentee ballot. It is therefore then mailed to you. There's a signature verification, which was also adjudicated by the Supreme Court in a case that the Democrat Party brought in South Carolina because they didn't want signature verification on absentee ballots. I think that's a threat to democracy. But also, you can go in person during early voting, and you can go, of course, on election day, which I think in that cycle when we have the national level elections, midterm elections, presidential elections, it should be a national holiday. People should be able to go and participate in our electoral democratic process. But see, something happened in 2020. And if you go back and you read an article written by Eric Holder, who was in charge of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee and the former Attorney General for Barack Obama, we'll talk about that little fast and furious thing maybe sometime later. But anyhow, Eric Holder wrote an article titled How Coronavirus Should Permanently Change Elections in America. And what did we get out of that article? this new term called mail-in ballots. Never been heard of before, never been used before. Completely unconstitutional when you think about it. Completely a threat to democracy. Because what a mail-in ballot says is that somebody somewhere just mails out ballots to addresses. No verification, because lots of times you don't have voter registration roll review. Oh, I forgot to mention, anytime you talk about voter registration roll review, the Marxist left, they bring lawsuits. In other words, another instance of their threat to democracy because they don't want voter registration rolls to be validated and reviewed. Even here in the state of Texas, back in the 2020 election, in Harris County, Texas, the supervisor of elections who was appointed by the county judge, county chief county administrator, Lena Hidalgo, his name was Chris Hollins. Chris Hollins had a plan to mail out millions, millions in the largest county here in the state of Texas, Harris County, which is Houston. I think it's the third largest county metroplex in the United States of America. He's going to mail out millions of ballots to addresses. There's nothing that could happen with that. There's nothing that could go wrong with that. Just mailing out a bunch of ballots unsecured. This is the same guy, Chris Hollis, that wanted to bring in 24-hour voting. You go out 2 o'clock in the morning, get some waffles at Waffle House, maybe stop by Denny's, and then you just fill out a ballot. And then you go put it in some drop box. That's another thing the left came up. Nothing can go wrong with that either. These drop boxes that are put wherever. And then Mr. Hollins also wanted to institute drive-through voting. Kind of like you go through Whataburger. That's a big thing down here in Texas. But you drive through Whataburger at any time of the night. Just drive up to a Whataburger and say, hey, I'd like a nice little Texas patty melt. And also, can I get a ballot? See, these are the type of things that the left are proposing. These are the type of things that the left wants to bring forward that are the real threats to democracy. And mail-in ballots is a huge threat to our democracy because how do you secure it? How do you validate it when you're just mailing out ballots? And there have been many instances of people saying, I received 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of ballots. What if those fall into the wrong hands? One of the problems that we ran into here in Dallas County, where I reside, is that they were actually allowing homeless people to register to vote. Now, I kind of thought that you had to have a address, but what was happening was that these people were putting down addresses of homeless shelters, street corners, the church, what have you. So where does that voter registration card go? Who picks up that voter registration card? Because most homeless people are transient. So now all of a sudden someone shows up and says, I'm so and so. I'm here to pick up this voter registration card. And the next thing you know, they're able to go out and vote. I think that's a threat to democracy. Or the reasonable impediment declaration that we have here in the state of Texas, where you can come up to a polling location and say, hey, you know what? I just haven't been able to get any type of form of ID, especially the picture ID. I'm declaring for a reasonable impediment. They get to vote. And let me just ask you something. How many of you that go out and travel a lot or go anywhere, pretty much so, but if you go out and travel a lot and you walk up to the counter and say, you know what? I need to get on this airplane. I have a reasonable impairment declaration that I like to put forward because I don't have any ID. Do you think that you're going to be able to get on an airplane? Oh, I'm sorry. Once again, during the Biden-Harris administration, we saw many times that illegal immigrants that were coming to this country under their free flyers program, they were able to bypass TSA, and they were able to get right on an aircraft without any type of ID. That's not just a threat to democracy, that's a threat to my safety and security, especially when we know that special interests aliens from places like Iran were released by this administration. So my whole point is that every time that the left comes out and says, well, you're doing something that's a threat to democracy, even if it's right along constitutional lines, even if it aligns itself with our rule of law, you can quote chapter and verse. Why don't we come back and call them out on it? Some of the instances that I just laid out. See, that's what the American Constitutional Rights Union wants to do. We are the bulwark. We are the opposition to the ACLU. Those guys, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, who are going out there and suing law enforcement agencies for enforcing the law. Another threat to our safety and security. Another, really and truthfully, a threat to our democracy. Because in the preamble of the Constitution, it says that the federal government is supposed to promote domestic tranquility. That means peace. That means not having mass crime and violence on our streets. I remember back in the Obama election of 2008, when there were members of the new Black Panther Party who were standing outside a polling location, dressed up in their garb, carrying billy sticks. I would tend to believe that coercion, intimidation, instilling fear, threatening violence at a polling location, that's a threat to our democracy. Kind of reminds me of that group called the SA, the brown shirts of Adolf Hitler. Kind of reminds me of another domestic terrorist organization that, well, our good friends at the Democrat Party started, called the Ku Klux Klan. They were all about voter intimidation and threats of violence, preventing people from going out and enjoying the right to vote that, I'll be very honest, the Republican Party had granted in the 15th Amendment, which the Democrat Party voted against. So I really think it's important that we start to look at that phrase that they use for everything, kind of like everybody's a racist. You don't like what we do, you're a racist. I mean, it's kind of funny when people call me a black white supremacist. I'm still trying to, understand that and peel that apart and get it through my head. But that's the desperation that someone has when you are able to debate with facts, calmly, and truth. They have to resort to the name calling and saying that you're a threat to democracy when they know clearly that they are truly the threat to democracy. So we here at the American Constitutional Rights Union will continue to call out the true and real threats to our constitutional republic, to our representative democracy, to your safety and security, to our domestic tranquility, to every aspect of us living the natural rights theory of John Locke, your life, your liberty, your property, those inalienable rights that Thomas Jefferson codified in our Declaration of Independence. And as always, if you've never read the entire Declaration of Independence, it only takes 10 minutes and 31 seconds. Try it. You might like it because then you will come to understand what a real threat to our freedom and liberty looks like. God bless you. We'll see you on the next episode of Live Free TV.